Well, hello and welcome back. I'm John Swaino,
I'm Dave Tenney.
and we are Two Beards in a Bible, and it is our aim through this channel to look through the scriptures and study together, and hopefully by looking in on our study and studying along with us, you can perhaps be built up by those efforts. And we hope to rightly divide the word of truth, and we, of course, we don't mind questions, so by all means, let us know if you have questions, and we don't claim to know everything, but we know someone that does.
Yeah, we're involved in a chronological study through the four Gospels. So we're basically going through Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John as if it was one book, as if it was all one chronological book. And I think that's it's a good way to go through it, and it kind of helps us move through all the Gospels,
Right.
in a timely manner, and it also it gives us a chance to kind of see what it looks like when they're all put together.
Right, and I can tell you that I've certainly reaped benefit from it because I've never really done that. I've never really gone through a chronological study, and it really does help it to make sense.
I did it about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And, a lot of this stuff I just forgot.
Yeah. So it's been, speaking for myself, it's been edifying, and I hope that it is for everybody else as well. All right, so we are looking at Matthew chapter 5, beginning at the 13th verse, and we're looking at the influence and duties of Messiah's subjects. So we'll begin there. I suppose I will go ahead and start reading. I don't know that Dave will fight me about that.
Nope, go for it.
We'll let him pick up at verse 17 here in just a little bit. But let's read Matthew 5, starting at verse 13. John needs to be on the right page. So here we go. So chapter 5, starting at verse 13. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its flavor, how shall it be seasoned? Is it then good for nothing? It is then good for nothing, but to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men. You are the light of the world. A city is set on a hill, cannot be hidden. Nor do they light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a lampstand, and it gives light to all who are in the house. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven.
Okay, so this follows the Beatitudes. Mm-hmm. And, I don't know if it's all the same speech, but it certainly reads that way. Certainly seems like the whole Matthew chapter 5 is more or less just kind of one long speech that Jesus gave for the most part. But he talks to us about, as he's talking to people who would believe in God, faithful people. Mm-hmm. And he talks about them that they're the salt of the earth.
Right.
And I like the idea of, salt is a common thing.
Yeah. It's relatively a cheap commodity, but potent. It does wonderful things. Just yesterday, I opened up a can of soup, and I tasted it, and I thought, that needs something. And there I went.
Wasn't Campbell's?
No, it was Progresso. And usually those are pretty good, but it needed something. So I went to the salt shaker and put some salt in there and some pepper, and the salt really does it wakes up the flavor.
It does,
and it is a powerful thing. And I was thinking about that as I was looking at the study here for today, and thinking about what salt does to food, and if we are the salt of the earth, that would be our job, wouldn't it? To wake people up, and share the gospel with them and bring a different flavor to life.
Yeah.
And not through us, but through the word. You know?
I like how he uses salt too, because just as an element, he didn't say we're the gold.
Right.
And I heard this the other day that if you took all of the gold in the whole world and put it in a football stadium, it would come up to the level of about the bottom of the goalposts.
Wow.
Now that's a rare thing. Mm-hmm. All of the gold in the entire world, that's all there is. But salt, it's a common thing. It's attainable by all. I believe even like old currency was kind of named after that idea of salt.
Yeah.
Trying to think of what's the British
The pound.
the pound, but I forget what their smallest coin is. It doesn't matter, but it had a relationship to salt.
Oh, okay.
The idea of a common thing, but I like how you said that. It talks about us being a salt, us kind of waking things up.
Yeah. Yeah. And that losing its savor, you think about that. We've read that. If you've spent any time in the scriptures, you've probably read that 100 times and passed over it. But salt, I've never really found salt that lost its savor. And what would you do?
If it wasn't doing what it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
If salt wasn't salty,
right.
What good is it?
Right. Yeah. We don't. And like you said, it's such a common thing that we don't scrape it off and save it.
No.
We throw it over our shoulder.
Then he talks about us being a light. Mm-hmm. And Jesus, himself is referred to as being a light.
Yeah.
And he talks about a light, and then he says a city is set on a hill, cannot be hidden. He says, nor do they light a lamp and put it under a basket. Now, we don't light lamps very often anymore.
Right.
I have a friend who built actually I helped him build it this summer. He built this cabin, and it's small. It's like 12 by 20. And, it must have been in December. He says, hey, Dave, you want to come out and have some coffee and we'll talk? And I went out there, and, it's out in the middle of nowhere, and there's no electric, and he had like 3 kerosene lamps in there.
Uh-huh.
And we sat and had a conversation. It was actually awesome.
Yeah.
Just to kind of like, it's almost like you were living, 100 years ago.
Right.
But back then, the idea of a lamp,
yeah.
It would be a burning, but even today, you wouldn't put one of the lamps here under a basket.
Right. I mean, we have the lights in front of us, and wouldn't do us any good if we covered them over.
Right. There would be no use for that light at all.
Yeah, and so we should, being the light of the world, the salt of the earth, we need to be those that have a savor. People should come across us, and they should understand that, hey, he's a Christian, he's speaking the word of God to me. That might not be popular, but they should at least know it. And if you speaking of salt losing its savor, or having a light under a lamp, or a lampstand under a basket, how many of your friends know that you're a Christian? How many of the people that we come into contact with do they really, have we ever spoken to them, or are we hiding our light? Are we?
Yeah, we show our light not necessarily just by our words, but by our actions.
Yeah.
That's how we show our light, how we show our salt, by how we treat other people and how we deal with others.
Yeah. People watch.
No, they do.
People are watching. And I can tell you that, in the neighborhood, my neighbors know that on Sunday morning, the garage door goes up and we leave.
Right.
And I've heard that said of others that, at the very least, they know that they know that those people go to church, and people are watching what we do. So if they know that we go to church, yet we're out in the front yard screaming and yelling horrible things at each other, or, not conducting ourselves in such a way that we would be salt and light.
Right.
Then that presents an issue.
It not only reflects bad on us, but it reflects bad on God.
That's the worst. Yeah.
That's why I think so many people have a horrible view of religion today, because it isn't because of religion, it's because of the people that have twisted it and they've used it as a method to become rich, become wealthy.
And that's the more common. There's a lot more of that going on than the Lord's church. It's and not to say that it doesn't happen in the Lord's church, because the Lord's church is made up of people.
It is,
and so let's not have any any false thoughts that that doesn't find its way into the Lord's church.
But Christians still make mistakes.
Exactly.
People who are part of, Jesus said that he was going to build his church, and that's just the idea of that is people that are Christians. But people that are truly Christians make mistakes sometimes.
Say that man is of few days and full of trouble.
Yes,
and that seems to.
I think that was one of the Psalms.
My brain is escaping me, but yes, it's in the scriptures.
Yes.
All right, so I think we've put that one out. Let's move on to Matthew 5, starting at verse 17. You want to read?
I'm going to just read through 20, and then we'll talk about that section.
Yeah.
This is talking about Christ fulfilling the law. He continues on, he says, "Do not think that I came to destroy the law or the prophets." He says, "I did not come to destroy, but to fulfill. For surely I say to you, till heaven and earth pass away, one jot or one little tittle by no means pass from the law till all is fulfilled. Whoever therefore breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches men so shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does and teaches them, he shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I say to you that unless your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven." So let's talk about that little section there.
Yeah. So as we read there, you read there in the beginning of that of verse 17 that Jesus came to fulfill the law, and that brings to mind when Jesus was on the cross before he took his last breath. What did he say?
He said, "It is finished."
Yeah. So, and that lines right up.
Yeah.
He came to fulfill the law, and all of those things that were prophesied, all of those things that men of old read about and kept telling their generations, all those things came to pass.
So, and the other thing, we had talked before we started recording today, we talked about, the old law being fulfilled, but the idea is that, Jesus didn't come to this earth to necessarily get rid of the old law. He came to, complete it. It was always part of God's plan, but that's why we don't follow the old law today. Christ has fulfilled everything that it required. And he became the ultimate sacrifice for that when he died on the cross.
And I heard it said, it came out in a study one time, that the old law was there, and I believe this is in Hebrews. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but it says that the old law was there to bring us up to Christ, or to prepare us, mankind, for Christ. We might think simplistically and think, well, why didn't, right after the fall of mankind, why didn't he just fix us then?
Right.
But there's an order to things and to God's plan, and his ways are higher than our ways. We'll never understand all those things, but all those things were prophesied that these things are going to be done, and it was done. Yeah.
I mean, the old law was for the Jews.
Yeah.
But, when God made the promise to Abraham way back in Genesis, he said, he said that all the world would be blessed through your seed. The whole world. That's more than just the Jews.
Right.
All nations would be blessed. So that's, it was always the plan.
Right.
That you would have this old law and it would be fulfilled. In fact, that's why you have all these prophecies that point towards Christ.
That statement about unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and the Pharisees, you will in no way enter the kingdom of heaven. By no means enter the kingdom of heaven. Verse 20.
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing when I read that, so the Pharisees, they outwardly, they really looked like they were doing everything correct. I mean, and if you study them, a lot of the Pharisees, they were deeply committed to doing things correctly. But the problem is they thought that by doing these things that would make them sinless. but they had other character flaws that crept up that I don't think they even realized about themselves.
Right. And they are the ones that were nipping at Jesus's heels the most, looking for a reason to convict him, looking for a reason to speak badly of him. And when you think about, they knew the law, they understood it, so some of their righteousness was in understanding God's law, but they fell short, and that they didn't recognize Christ before their very eyes.
Yeah.
And so if we are to have any part in the kingdom of heaven, we've got to go further than them.
Yeah. We've not only got to we've not only got to have the sort of understanding of God's will that they did, but we have to understand it more completely than they did.
Yeah.
And we have to live it 100%.
There's I've used this from time to time from the pulpit and lessons. One of the things, we might have mentioned it here before, I'm a creature of habit, but as a child, there was this commercial, Robert Schuller.
The Crystal Cathedral.
Yeah,
yes.
The Crystal Cathedral, and on Saturday mornings or whatever, you'd see that advertised. And I remember the Robert Schuller, the preacher, pounding on the pulpit saying, "Don't just sit there, do something." And that's like forever etched in my mind, and it comes to mind often.
Yes.
And at the very least, that was a very truthful statement. We've got to do more than just sit there.
Right. In fact, in this scripture here, he says, but whoever does and teaches them, he says, so he's talking about his commandments. And he says, whoever breaks the least of these commandments and teaches men so somebody who's teaching the wrong thing, he's going to be called the least. But then he says, but whoever teaches the correct thing, and does them. And there's always that connection of doing.
Yeah.
And that's a theme throughout the New Testament, actually throughout the whole Bible, the idea of doing. Faith is always followed by some sort of action.
Right.
You can go back to the Noah's Ark.
Right. Even the demons believe and tremble, but they didn't have an action following that. Yeah.
Right.
And we've maybe heard our parents, and maybe we've said this to our children, do as I say, not as I do.
That's terrible. That's terrible parenting.
It is terrible. But it really likens back to the Pharisees, do as I say. I'm going to tell you what the law says and what you should be doing, but don't pay attention to what I'd go do behind the curtain.
Yeah, and I can tell you, like, for me, there are certain Christians, and some of them have passed away, but there are certain Christians that have been in my life and are in my life, and it's through their example that gives me strength to do the right thing.
Yeah.
I see them doing the right thing consistently.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of person we should be too.
Yeah.
We should be that example to others too. We should do the right thing.
Right. And it is, I say this just about every Sunday. It's, in my mind, there's no mistaking that Christ commanded us to come together on the first day of the week so that we could be that support for one another, so that we could be an example to one another and show each other that, yes, this is hard, but we can get through it. Just this week, I had a pressing question, and my mind was just drawing a blank, a scriptural question, and I called a preacher friend of mine, and he starts rattling off these scriptures. He's driving down the road, in the car, and he's rattling these scriptures off, and I'm like, where is that coming from? That's awesome. And that's something that built me up a little bit and said, you know what, I can do that too. I just need to keep studying, keep reading, and in time, and that's, we're built up by those around us all. We're either built up or torn down.
Oh, that's
by
absolutely
those around
true.
us.
Let's look at the next section here, which would be, so we're still in Matthew 5, and this will be our last section we'll go through today. It'll be verses 21 through 26. John, you want to read that for us?
Yep, starting at verse 21. You have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not murder, and whoever murders will be in danger of the judgment. But I say to you that whoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment. And whoever says to his brother, Raka, shall be in danger of the council. But whoever says, you fool, shall be in danger of hellfire. Therefore, if you bring your gift to the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there and before the altar, and go your way. First be reconciled to your brother, then come and offer your gift. Agree with your adversary quickly while you are on the way with him, lest your adversary deliver you to the judge. The judge hand you over to the officer, and you be thrown into prison. Assuredly, I say to you, you will by no means get out of there till you have paid the last penny.
Oh, Raka.
There we go.
What does that mean? I had to look this one
Yeah,
up.
you go ahead, because I'm not going to be able to properly define that in my head.
Empty-headed.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw that and I was like,
I was equating it to the "you fool," basically.
The way here's a memory trick. It means you have rocks in your head. Raka. You got rakas in your head. So that's kind of a good way to think of it. So Jesus is talking here. He's talking about some. He says, "You have heard these. It said of those of old." He says, "You shall not murder," and of course, be going back to the Ten Commandments. What is murder? How do we define murder?
It's killing without a cause.
Right. Yeah. Right. It's one thing. There's a difference between murdering somebody and killing somebody.
Right.
So.
But for instance, in the military, sometimes, unfortunately, there's going to be those times where, and maybe for out of self-defense, you may find yourself in a position where you take someone's life. That is the absolute last resort, but that's not murder.
That's not murder.
Yeah.
Same way you may cause a car accident.
Right.
Maybe you didn't see a car coming and you pulled out in front of them and somebody died.
Right.
That's not murder.
Right.
It's terrible.
Right.
Probably more terrible for the living than the dead in a lot of ways.
Right. And the legal system understands that.
It does.
Our legal system is founded on biblical principles, in many cases, and the legal system understands. They have the different degrees of murder, and they understand that. They would call that what.
They go like second or third degree. I think third degree murder would be those.
Yeah, but if doing it with knowledge ahead of time, it would be murder. But then it's manslaughter.
Yeah, manslaughter.
If you kill somebody in a car crash,
that's manslaughter.
Yeah.
Versus like if you make a plan out and you jump behind the bushes and knife somebody, that's totally different.
Right.
So he talks about that. So whoever murders will be in danger of the judgment. Well, I mean, obviously, right? Mm-hmm. He says, but I say to you, now, Jesus always brings it back. He always brings it back to the kind of thoughts that are in our heart. He says, whoever is angry with his brother without a cause.
Right.
Which is the same kind of deal, right?
Yeah.
Makes me think about Cain and Abel.
Mm-hmm.
Because Cain was mad at his brother, and he didn't have a cause to be mad at his brother.
Right.
Abel offered what God said to offer. He did the right thing, and Cain didn't.
Right.
So Cain should have been mad at himself.
Right.
But rather, he was mad at his brother. That's in Genesis chapter 4, I believe. But yeah, that's the idea of this. You want to read?
Well, I was just thinking of in verse 7 of Genesis 4. Let's go to verse 6. So the Lord said to Cain, "Why are you angry? And why is your countenance fallen?" Verse 7, "If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin lies at the door, and its desire is for you, but you should rule over it."
Yeah.
So even there, if you do well,
yes,
you'll be okay. And same thing here.
So Jesus has this. He's teaching basically the same thing that God warned Cain about. That this thing starts in your heart. Mm-hmm. And it's not a big step. You go from there to killing somebody.
Right.
And
boy, that's probably a box that we don't want to open here now, but you can plug any of today's woes and popular in our culture today, any of the societal woes into that and realize that it starts in the heart.
It does.
And we can make rule after rule, law after law. We can ban this, that, and everything else. But until we attack the heart problem in the people,
Yeah.
it's not going to stop.
Yeah, I think a lot of people today think that, they're gonna come up with some other kind of government,
Right.
or other kind of laws that are somehow going to make everything
Yeah.
perfect. And
Think back to Israel, who wanted a king. God told him, you don't really want that.
yeah,
But they didn't listen to God, so he gave them what they asked
Yeah.
for. And all God wanted was for them to work on their hearts and to fix the heart problem that they had.
right. But they couldn't do that.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and look at the last part here. So he says, therefore, as you bring your gift to the altar, he says, remember that your brother has something against you. Leave your gift there before the altar and go on your way. First be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. And the idea, I think, of that whole section is if we're harboring some kind of anger in our hearts, towards somebody else, we need to get rid of that.
Right.
You can't be in a proper relationship with God. You couldn't offer God an acceptable prayer
Right.
when you're harboring these kind of things in your heart.
Right. Yeah, we just did a lesson last Sunday or Sunday before last on prayer, and talking about the clearing your mind. When you're praying to God, you're talking to God.
Yes.
Through Christ, and that's a serious thing. That's not a flippant thing where oftentimes when we pray, we just say, oh, well, thank you for my food, thank you for my dog, thank
Yes.
you for it,
Yeah.
and it can get very shallow. We need to wake up and be in the right mindset
We
to
do.
be acceptable to God.
He closes off this, and this is where we'll stop at. He closes off. He says, agree with your adversary quickly. He says, while you are on the way with him, lest your adversary deliver you to the judge. And
Yeah.
and sometimes that's what can happen is you're going to have some disagreement with somebody, and you may be in the wrong, and then a third party comes in, a lawyer or a judge, and all of a sudden now you're in deep trouble.
And there's an understanding there, a parallel with God's law, that the law is the law and the law is going to be upheld. And so fix it before you get to that point of judgment.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's,
this life.
yeah,
Yeah. We have this time now.
yeah.
All right, John, I think we should stop there.
All right. Well, I thank you again, everybody, or anybody that has chosen to tune in and study along with us. I hope you found it to be a useful bit of time for you. And I know that Dave and I appreciate you. And again, if you have any questions or would like to study further, if you have questions about baptism and salvation, of course, we would love to study with you. Whatever your need may be, if you have Bible questions, we would love to give you Bible answers. And as I mentioned, we started out, I said, in passing at the beginning of when we started out, I said, we might not know the answer, but we know someone that
Right.
does. I'm not talking about a human being on earth. I'm talking about God. He gave us his word, and that's where we're going to go for those answers. So thanks again for joining in, and we'll see you next time.